So I couldn't function with it. You know, that degree of, I don't think I could, to be honest.
Well, in that case, you just go back and forth. Like you have one session that is one person doing it, and that's what you tried to do with Gary.
So, well, that's it. I just try and isolate. I just, you know, a dog at the bit, or what, chomping at the bit, you know, and just stay focused on one thing. And
so we're talking about how that one idea for this hangout that I want to do it regularly is that I want to find out what other people think as a primary focus. I want to find out what people actually believe that they think, what it seems like they think based on, you know, other things they say on the topic, you know, separate from how they would characterize it. And so we're just talking about that, and what Hythloday was having trouble with was the idea that you could do both directions at once, that like I could inquire abstractly into somebody's idea with, you know, not judging it other than trying to understand it, and that person could do that to me at the same time, because yeah, it's confusing. It's kind of like you should build one picture, both of you work on building this one picture of the one person's view so that I understand it and could say, so you believe A, B, C, D, and E, and you would actually go, yeah, that is it. And vice versa, that you would take it. I think with respect to that, the focus of this thing, if I run a regular and spend the time to do this, I would want to ask. I feel like being the one to ask the questions and find out what the, you know, guests and other people, even other regulars, think and drill down into that. I feel that is the most useful. I wonder, do you think one or the other is better? I think, or the
make it
power
more reasonable. People can all, like, we have a show called Question Time in the UK, where, you know, everybody asks what you think, and there's a question, and everybody throws into the hoop what they think, and so in that kind of formalism can work. But in terms of scrutinising arguments, which was where we was at back in the day, where two people think they've actually got a definitive position on the same point, it's too distracting to, you either say, look, let's scrutinise your position, see if it's logically sustainable, or let's scrutinise my position. In essence, one person interviews the other. You know what I mean? Only in the talk show kind of sense, there's only one person who runs the talk show, you know. That's the way I see it with actual positions. In terms of just a generalised forum, yeah, it can work in a less formal situation.
Well, see, what I've tried to do for both people to be able to do this at once, two people or more create one idea at the same time, which seems impossible because it gets torn up by the little disagreements, is you try to comb through the disagreements, find out where they really start. What I find is that people don't like to do that because it's this old philosophical thing of like, well, do you think we exist? Then are we on a planet? Is the planet spinning? And people feel like they're getting trapped. And really, so it's hard to do the process of discovery. But if a bunch of people, and this happens in a professional, like in an engineering situation where a bunch of engineers or whomever are trying to solve a problem, or a bunch of carpenters or whatever, where you have to get together, people can do discovery on these ideas and find out a plan together. And but we have real trouble doing that when it comes to, you know, what we believe or these ideas, whatever it is with it.
Well, you've been a team leader on a software front, right? And
sometimes, yeah.
I often wondered. My dad was my late father. He had a reputation. What's the guy who sang "My Way"? I did it my way.
Frank Sinatra.
Frank Sinatra. He said they nicknamed him Frank because it had to be done his way. He used to. You know, not a very modern managerial technique, you know, and there's something I understand about his position, that sometimes some things need that imprint, and then it seems more inspirational to get all the ideas and do this kind of teamwork thing, but practically it doesn't always work, and when it works, and not finding out all those ideas. And I wonder what your management thought is on a group of people developing software, ultimately somebody has to go, right, we've got all the ideas, but somebody has to sort of say, right, this is the structure. To me, I imagine that the leader of a software group says, okay, we've took it all in. I'm going to, I come back, I said, this is the structure, and I'm going to give you this module, you that module, and I'll review it, and then we'll work on the interfacing later and things. That's my conception of it.
Yeah, that does have to happen, and so it's interesting you should bring that up. So cut me off if I go into it too much. But so one quick background is there was a famous study in the 90s where they studied big software projects, and some huge percentage, like I think it might have been 90%, were failing. So we're talking about projects where $1 million or more was spent to put a team together, and the project fails even to produce software, even crappy software. Okay, so there was a crisis in planning, and basically I feel it's safe to say that we've discovered something I kind of believed all along, is that no single hierarchy of command, the traditional command and control hierarchy, can actually address the problems in software development, because there's different kinds of questions that different kinds of experts need to have final say on. So what's come about is really right now the most modern way of organizing software teams is a thing called agile development, or what we called iterative development. And for example, one practice, and some of the pioneers of this have invented a system called Scrum, and you can actually get Scrum certified. And in Scrum there's various team roles. The developers kind of are their own boss, but there's a product developer. They work on defining a sprint, which is a 1 month bundle of work, maybe 2 months, whatever you want it to be. People are tending to make it shorter and shorter. And then there's a Scrum Master that's not a developer, that meets kind of every day and keeps all of these sort of to-do lists. And then also there's a bunch of the philosophy of how do you remember what you need to do, and then that's a separate thing, but for what it's worth, it's the idea is you write these user stories. You don't write requirements in the old, it must be this far from the wall kind of style as if it was an architectural requirement. You write, I am, a user logging into the website. I want to change my password by going to my settings and typing in my new password, and then a developer can see that story and can either say, yeah, I could do that in a couple hours, or this doesn't make sense, and they break it down into other stories until it's a tiny bit of work. And there is no super boss overall hierarchically, because the development team, for example, gets to make independent decisions on a whole range of anything development. And but there's a product owner that's kind of the company that represents the company, and they can make demands. Most of their demands have to happen outside of the sprint, in between sprints. So you have a month where the developers just work, and all they do is say how far they're going, because at the beginning it's been defined what the boss, so-called, the product owner wants. So there's a lot of work on that to improve what's basically really hard to organize. Software projects are difficult to organize.
It was all in my academic side of computing. Did a lot of focus on the problem of software development, and like you said,
oh really,
the statistics of failing design and running over budget in the UK. Our government was always commissioning software for flight navigation software and this, that, the other. Air control traffic ran hugely over budget. Then we get health service database runs 2 years over budget, and this, that, and the other. And yeah, it's a hard thing managing that complexity. But
well, what I always thought, just the simple kind of thing that worked really well, is we would have some milestone we're working on, some version of the software, and then we finish it, and then there's all kinds of things you want to do for the next version. So everybody in the team gets together, and you write all those things on the whiteboard that you can think of. And as you're doing that, people go, oh, but if you have to do that, you're going to have to do this other thing. So you argue and you end up with this list, and then you just go through the list like you're picking teams on a schoolyard, and people pick the ones they want. And as you get down to the ones that are kind of the more boring or tedious, whatever work people don't like, because you're picking, people start going for the bad thing they don't mind as much as the one that's a pet peeve, and so people end up not having the one they really hate, but the one that's like not the most fun, but they, you know what I mean?
Two evils. So it all gets done by picking the lesser of two evils by somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's and with doing that, you can picture about 3 months' work that way. You'll often in one meeting, or maybe a short couple of them, but we're talking a 3-hour meeting, you'll figure out all those items, and that's kind of what Scrum says. So you have these Scrum meetings where you would figure out all that, and then you know what you're going to work on for 3 months. And it just doesn't happen that, but it only took us 2 weeks. That's not how software works. You know, it's going to take 3 months. Don't worry. So then you know you're busy, and then everybody's kind of their own boss to a certain degree. Within the development team, there will be a lead programmer type person that organizes stuff, but when you're given one of those tasks, a user story to satisfy, you know, you get to decide how to do it.
The frustrating thing, though, about the software I've developed, and that I wouldn't like to work in a team, you know, you just said it about, you know, the next revision, the next version. You know, you'd sketch out what the targets are for this goal. I lost your audio there. I've still got you.
I was asking for a coffee. She didn't hear me, so I might have to go get my own coffee. Yeah, but I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
The software I've worked on, and the worries I have about working in a team with software, is this idea of, right, we've got these goals for the software, and then maybe in the future we'll put these extra features in. In terms of database design, you start thinking about the structure. And if you say you've got to get the structure right to facilitate the right development, or it's a load of rework, you know, monumental task. So I find as I set myself programming tasks and I work out the details, I think I'm always back working and scrapping it and saying, oh, I have to get this right. For, you know, I couldn't. It'd be like, what if you found you was getting the cart before the horse, you know, and you wanted to make the argument that on version 1 really should have one of what we've thought about that might come in later versions should be brought forward and be in version 1 because of the structural fundamental importance of it, you know.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. That's what I do in design, is sorting that stuff out.
Yeah, so that's I guess it relates, you know, I mean, as government anything to learn from how people design software? I mean, is it a model that, you know, we talked about how the vast running over budgets and timescales. Is it substantially improved from, what, 10, 15 years ago, from when I academically looked at it?
Well, what do you mean? Is what improved? And what were you saying? You were saying something about working on a team in software seems like a problem, as opposed to alone.
That's it. I've never worked on this. Oh, well, actually, in a way, I have. When I was 20, they asked me and a colleague to write a program for a pallet inserting machine in a production line. And what happened is I wrote a program and he wrote a program, yeah? And he couldn't get his to work, but he was the first one to so-called write it and install it in the machine. And he spent a week cursing and you know, struggling to get it to work. And what I did is that in one night I got mine to work. Yeah, but I was told not to put mine in until the end of the week, when the bosses started fretting and saying, and I said, mine will work because it's not a complicated process. I said, you know, he's an old guy with no, you know, experience in writing a whole program basically. And I said, anyway, I downloaded it, I worked it, I said, see, it works. But all the feedback, I were working on the night shift, all the feedback, but I couldn't imagine any circumstance in which I could work with this other guy, this as negotiating this particular, it's not it's a different thing perhaps, but just lost you. Oh, you're sharing screen.
I'm gonna go get some coffee, but this is something I wanted to talk about. We have this racism story that my wife is from South Dakota and has friends from there, and a Native American friend that's been Facebooking this story. But but I'll talk about it when I get right back, and I'll take the screen off when I get back. I'm gonna go get some coffee. Okay.
I'll see if
I should mute because people complain about not muting. I'm back.
hello. I just had a quick skim read on Google search. But you Yanks, I mean, the British can be overly patriotic, you know.
Hi, Condell.
Yeah, it's.
No, I got to tell you, look, I'm a liberal American, and I'll buy this American thing, but we're just the little brother that came in after Big Brother and the other Big Brother and the other Big Brother and the Big Sister and the other Big Brother went and raped and just terror around the whole world. And there's still, you have all of the people that think that way. And I mean, a perfect example really is the French, not to hate on the French, but, you know, they'll bomb, where was it, the Ivory Coast, or they have the whole, you know, and they do the weapons sales and all of this stuff. And they have a very right-wing attitude. We didn't invent that. We have some of them, but you know what I mean? It's like, and as far as the British successfully avoided the loss of their empire by saying, okay, can we just keep the banks? You guys gonna own everything. We just want all the debt for everything, right? Okay. So, and they really actually own everything still. So, but not you as the citizen were probably benefiting more from the old school empire when you could go be a captain in India or whatever. I don't know, you know. But there's certain people, so you can't really just say us. But yes, the racism is probably definitely more blatant. But Europe definitely has its, you know, you can see it's happening.
Well, I was talking about. I mean, the racism it sounds racist. Just skim reading it, it seemed like they didn't stand or pay particular homage to
But
the
here, wait, but yeah, yes.
greatness of the US, you know. So then they because they were a group. I mean, it was more about the fact the group didn't
Okay.
do, you know.
First of all, my understanding is they did stand and they were being respectful, and it was 9-year-old to 13-year-old kids. And so the real racism that I put up on my thing showing the Rapid City Journal, the local newspaper down there, bringing up whether they stood up or not. So what if they didn't stand up? They are from the reservation. It isn't their country, supposedly. They have their own country. Maybe they didn't even stand up, but guess what? They did. And you know, and they go into the military and everything else, and it's racist there. And the newspaper actually puts in the headline, "Did they stand up?" Like that's even an issue. Not really even an issue, and it'll turn out, you know, that they did stand up. And if one kid didn't stand up or whatever, so what? You know, and especially since. Frankly, they're supposed to have their own nation, and when it's convenient, go back to the res, and when it's not convenient, we want to drill oil on your land or whatever.
What state was this, by the way? I didn't catch.
Well, this is South Dakota. South Dakota has the Lakota tribes in it, and the biggest reservation, Pine Ridge, and I believe that's correct. And it's where the Black Hills, we gave basically the Lakota used to be called the Sioux, and they are in South Dakota, which is in the middle of the U.S., kind of to the north, so north of Colorado. And people were heading out through the plains in these areas to get out west, and so we had never killed off all of the Lakota, and we were still having battles, and so they were raiding people that were coming by, and finally we negotiated with them and ended the war with them and let them have this area around Rapid City called Black Hills. Then, just a few years later, Custer was going through there on his way to get massacred, I believe, and found gold. He'd brought a prospector with him. They found gold. Americans rushed into there and lived with no law in a place called Deadwood and in these hills, but a town called Deadwood is famous. And there was no laws because they weren't in the United States. Eventually, though, they discovered this gold. George Hearst made tons of money off of it, and they annexed it back into the United States. But the history is that there's still the Pine Ridge and I forget 100,000, or I forget what it is. It might even 10,000. I don't know. It's thousands of the Lakota still there. It kind of pissed off about all this. I mean, the Black Hills are also where we have Mount Rushmore, where we put Teddy Roosevelt up there, and people that are totally anathema to, the Native Americans who, by treaty, are supposed to own that piece of land.
Yeah.
To this day, they should. It should be given back to them, I think.
Well, did they not sing? Was it? I mean, what was the actual act of racism then? I read death threats and.
Well, what I heard is they're up in a box and they're dropping beer and screaming racial things at these.
Yeah.
Now that they have some sort of excuse in their racist mind is no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. But I think they were just racist.
Well, I didn't manage to get the specifics of it. I just glanced and the issue came up of whether they stood or not. I don't think the article you had up was particularly clear, but I was rushing.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Whether they was exonerated.
No, I figured you'd be limited to me explaining it so that you skimmed it at all was more. But I was just saying, so the issue there, really, the broad issue then, since, of course, we don't know all the details, but you bring up some of them, like, was there some sort of provocation? Well, it's 9 to 13-year-olds, so we could pretty much put that aside, that, of course, it's not appropriate for adults to behave that way. But the bigger thing, too, is just that we have these Thunderfoot and these kind of neo-reactionary would-be liberals, but really they're having this kind of reaction that, feminism's gotten its way, get over it. Racism, yeah, we used to be racist. And they like to point out, too, that, well, point into the law. The law, they're equal. And it's like, well, since when did what is legally supposed to be the case determine. That's like saying it's safe down in the city park at night because it's illegal to hurt you. You know, it's not safe, then it's not safe. And if you're talking about whether it's safe or whether it's racist, then it either is or isn't, whether or not there's, you know, some sort of legal situation. And I mean, we're still heavy in the middle of it. And with Europe, it's the same thing. I mean, Europe has this liberal sensibility that it could feel like it's past it in a lot of ways. But I mean, in some respects, even things like ubiquitous national healthcare and liberal institutions like that could fall away. I mean, you could have, there's enough fascism over there that if there was a wave of it again, you know, people would, well, actually, fascists might not take away this socialized medicine, but there could be some sort of libertarian or neo, you know, Koch brother kind of restructuring of society that, you know, buys its way into a political movement, or like they do sometimes, and it could happen in Europe as well. We're not really very secured against this stuff. I mean, it's definitely there's a battle aspect to it.
In the UK, we have it's often in the news, the concept of something called institutional racism. Do you get that phrase over there? Because I think people are blind to, you know, bona fide, it's in the law, you know, you're equal. But the Snake Plissken's recently made a video which in Mendon took him to task about, which was quite good. Like, I've stopped for getting too high rate now with the Mendham and Snake Plissken about their particular views, but they seem blind to these pervasive cultural norms which continue despite what might be on paper that you know, everybody has equal chance, and you know, that you're legally the same, you know. They seem oblivious to, like, one of the classic examples for sexism I recently come across was about papers. They asked a lot of scientists to rate these papers or something, and when they knew that they were from women, or the ones were from women, they got rated badly. But when they was given randomized with no sex assignment or random sex assignment, the women fared equal or better. You know, so even in academia, the prejudice exists there, and that's what I call institutional racism. It's the fact that I'm racist and I don't even know it. With my best hopes and ambitions, I can't help but be racist, sexist, and many other forms of bigotry, probably. But it's,
well, I mean, what do you mean? Because I think if you did that test to me, I think I would be able to be pretty unbiased. And if I was biased by those factors, mind you, because there's other factors, we could separate this out. You know, I might be like overly, because my sensitivities are in reaction to oppression. Then it's the same thing if I react like, if I favor the ones by women.
I can't say on a particular thing like you, but the point is that do you believe there's no thing which would surprise you about yourself? You know what I mean? You could
no, there would. I could tell you how I think that works. I think the reason it's inevitable is because basically we're thinking by emotions, and so everything sets the stage for an emotion, which then, you know, for example, the obvious case is something that seems threatening at first puts you on edge. If it turns out not to be threatening, something else is still, you're heightened. You know, there's tests to do this where you see one image and it puts you ready to have another emotion. And so even if you're mistaken about the thing being threatening, just the fact that you thought that, you know, primes you. And so of course that's a bias. And it's not so much that you're going, oh, and by the way, you know, I'm going to add another -1 because of this person is a woman, and and you subconsciously do that, it's more like emotional conditioning,
Yeah,
puts
exactly.
you in this stage. Like you see a woman and suddenly you're thinking about love, and so you're not thinking about intellectual things, and the intellectuality of the situation just naturally seems less for you. And so there's always going to be biases like that. And so yeah, there you need to use tricks
Well,
when you're doing reasoning to cut things out. But some
that's the
biases you can get rid of.
that's the difference between your fallacious reasoning, which are actually faulty, uneducated logic and reasoning. But like you said, the cognitive biases are emotional traits that we all, can fail at. Some to more than others. But yeah, that's. I mean, I know you're always interested in this forum of, and I am, of how to interact. And to me, that's one of the central problems to be addressed in figuring it out, is how to take out the fallacious reasoning, how to take out the cognitive biases somehow. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think there's a pretty clear scientific tradition, centuries old, that we can apply a little bit, which is that step one is you don't deny your biases. You try to find out what they are. I mean, in science, you always have this plus or minus. You have to, when you make a calculation, also make the calculation of what errors is your device introducing, which you can know because then people do science on, wait, how much noise, informational noise is introduced by an amplifier, so that when you take the CCD that has this image inside it, and you have to basically pump the bits out through an amplifier, and you're going to scramble some of those bits. How many is it going to be? Plus or minus. Suddenly you know the plus or minus of that detector, and you can chain this together, and that's how science and engineering, in terms of, you want to look at those things as engineering specs, where you need to keep those numbers within a range. And so why can't we do that? So for example, if somebody is biased and can admit it, you still have the illusion, as the biased person, the illusion that it matters. You have to deal with the illusion, if you're that person, which I don't have this particular bias, but that that paper isn't very good. You have that illusion. That paper's really better than you think it is. But if you know you have that bias, you can kind of take it into account. Now, it's not the same as not having the bias and really reading the paper, but you can kind of take it into account, and that's where someone might overcompensate and go, you know what, I know I'm biased against women intellectually, so what, it's a woman, yeah, put it in there, it's probably great, and not even judging it, right? There's still dangers, but the scientific method says, yeah, but you're still better off. Trying to readjust for your error will still put you closer to where you should have been.
I guess that's the experiment that they didn't do. I suppose really what they should have done is to do the experiment, knowing the gender, not knowing the gender, and then knowing the people who have taken the exercise, redo it and say, look, we've shown that you're biased. Let's see if you can improve with the knowledge. And I'm sure they would improve.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
Yeah, for sure. But knowledge, that's what it does. It allows you to improve if you know it. But that's the problem, is that too many people will say, no, I'm not. I'm really good at. I'm really fair. I know the world's unfair, but everybody considers themselves, what's the word? Shining example of fairness. There's a word for it. I'm coming for it.
I don't know.
You'll come.
But I don't really believe that it's necessary that it's entirely natural that people view themselves that way. It's kind of like the invisibility of the air, or how you get used to a smell, or people are their own normal situation. That's what you measure everybody else on your own situation, whether you know it or not. Now, it gets warped out when people watch a lot of TV and movies, and then their view of their own situation gets distorted based on this fantasy world, and but still there's some sort of worldview that they have that they're going to be imposing on the situation.
It's still just it still presents a problem for real life, live debate or structured conversation, because you don't always have the time to conduct such surveys and then inform people of their own biases. So again, I think the problem as structuring conversation still holds.
Well, see, I really like bias as an interesting term, because when you're familiar with bias in electronics, I think it provides a pretty good metaphor of why bias isn't really a bad thing. You need to have a bias. It's like if you're tuning something in, or if you're, it's all about playing with biases, and ignoring other wavelengths in itself is a bias. And so, but the electrical idea, because you're going to actually set the gain and stuff, and yeah, you might turn it, adjust your machine so that the bias is higher, and you're getting more amplification, and in the end result, you do great with the signal to noise, but you go up too much and there's distortion and it doesn't work. Too little, it's not amplifying. So it's like, I think people just need a better relationship with their biases. I mean, if you go into a situation with a bias, it ought to be possible to say what that bias is. You're saying maybe I'd be surprised about biases that I don't know I have, but
yeah, I'm saying the cognitive biases, which I think there are 100 or so or more identified. When they say cognitive biases, that it's a neural disposition. It's not a faulty reasoning, which essentially, as you've said, gives an emotive.
No, but you can change these things.
Yeah. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm saying in a debate, it's difficult. A debate or any structured conversation, it's difficult. There is no dials to compensate, as you put it, electronically.
Well, but there has to be. We have to, in that debate, we have to be, one of the things we're doing in the exploratory aspect of the debate, right, the part that's identifying what people's beliefs are, is we're identifying potential biases, like I tend to trust people, I don't tend to trust people. These are biases we can be honest about, because we have reasons that we feel like, well, most people aren't. You have to not trust first, but yeah, you have to trust first, whatever.
We're in agreement then. I guess it's just questionable whether it would be overly optimistic to think that you'd get enough people who are honest about that. I think too few people. Not enough people are willing to accept the biases that they have.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, it's a big hobby of mine, and a big part of this hobby for me is confronting a lot of those biases. And, as a popular movement thing, no, it's totally the opposite of it. It has a lot of friction. People don't want to go along with it. They resist. But, it's like I'm more inclined to go to an atheist and point out their misconceptions of science than to a young Earth creationist and do that. When I go to a young Earth creationist, I might point out the flaws in their interpretation of the Bible, or with the apologists, I go ahead and actually try to give the atheist understanding of the answer to the Christian apologetics, the logical presuppositional apologetic stuff. So, and I could say, no, that's not the way to build. But that's another thing, like I was talking to Gary last night about these idea of how could we have this debate forum, better, and I think we need certain tools. And Gary's idea is like have a site where there's the best jury in the world and they decide who wins and the people win money. But it's like, I'm not going to agree with that committee. My idea is something like that, but I would like you basically get to create your own committee. So there's an antinatalist committee and a natalist club, and when you're in the group, you get to vote for who wins according to that group. That award committee decides who wins the debate according to antinatalists. So the antinatalists give a trophy and a prize, and yeah, maybe a cash prize or whatever, trip to Bermuda, to that person, and there'll be another committee that gives it to the other side. Certainly, if it was atheist and young Earth creationists, if there were two committees, they'd each always give the one ringer the prize, but they would probably still compete on who could give the better prize, or maybe there'd be some creativity in how that kind of stuff works. So I think you can do it with multiple groups, and since it's online, we have the advantage of you can be in more than one group. So when people thumb up and thumb down thing, depending on the groups that they're registered, and they're be vetted though, it's not just like I show up and I'm in this group because I say so. No, somebody who created that group has to say, yes, I let you vote in the antinatalism thing, because there's a prize awarded with it. You can't just, people don't just wander in. It's not an open primary. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you just said about Gary there, and made me think that Gary was probably like my father in the sense that nobody would get, this best jury and best set of judges in the world, and they will rule the prize winners.
Yeah,
and nobody, I couldn't see Gary Emendum. He'd veto everybody, he'd be like, no, they're not qualified.
He demanded, last night he was insistent.
It would turn out that only he was capable of being
Let me stand up for Gary. Let me stand up for Gary, and that Gary somehow, I was going, yeah, Gary, who would you choose? So you could choose one, and then that's one of the committees, fine. And he's like, no, I don't want to choose it. I'm not going to choose it. We're going to, and I'm trying to tell him, so like, you don't want to choose the person, you want to choose the mechanism. Well, good luck with that. I want to create a piece of software where anybody that thinks they has a mechanism can try it out. And then if I'm going to market people to be in a group, I'm going to go try to talk to some physicists and say, hey, will you guys watch one physics video a week and vote on if it's stupid? You know what I mean? That would be the committees I'd be interested in. Go ahead and let's try to get some expertise, because I really like that we're all talking to each other, and that's always been what it's about for me. But I've been doing this since I was 13 and got my first modem, and it's kind of like, okay, I'm ready to, I think it is a jungle. We preserve the jungle, never tear down the jungle, but we also need some gardens and places that are manicured, and that there's a method to the madness, right? So
well, take for instance, we've dialogued on quantum mechanics and on kind of economics, and I've dialogued with Emendum on his antinatalism, and touched at times on education and economics, maybe, I'm not sure. But if somebody wanted to, the idea of your structured conversations and connecting those links, to me, it's more than just thumbs up, and it's actually organising the conversation.
Yeah.
In terms of, I have this, setting the purpose, identifying question issues, identifying mechanisms about what kind of objection you've raised, like to whether it's accuracy or relevancy or the importance of a particular and it just seems that in general conversation, video conversation, that goes on for a protracted period of time, it's to the audience who actually watch it and follow it in series, there's probably value in it, but it could never be redone over. Who would ever start at the beginning of one of our long chain of interactions, or Emendum and yourself, blah blah blah, and make sense of it? It's too difficult and too loose and
yeah. Well, I think if they were all a clear reply structure, you would have people doing that. Yeah.
Well, that's where I actually bought into the idea.
But I also want auto-highlighting. We need to use the machine somehow to be able to auto-highlight and cut down enough highlights so that people can see, which you could do by the people that do watch it if they thumb up and thumb down, and you know what group they're in, and it's not just a thumb up or thumb down, but it's like, yes, it was intelligent, this is false, this was correct, but a little bit of information. Then you could maybe number crunch that and find out where everybody said, thumbs up, informative. Okay, and if a bunch of idiots voted and you see it and you go, it still would be a highlight. It's the part all the idiots thought was smart, it's still a highlight, so you couldn't really go wrong. You wouldn't necessarily, the computer can't make what the person said correct or anything, and it can't even not take them out of context, because it'd still be following what the audience did. But if it's directly related to how the audience reacted, that's a useful highlight for me as a viewer to go, especially if I know that. I'm like, I'm watching, it's not an editor didn't do this, but the audience reacting, thumb up, thumb down to this moment caused it to be in the 3-minute highlight reel. That's, I think, will be informative. I think there's a good chance that we'll be able to condense some information that way. And this is a big advantage, because if there's 24 hours of video back and forth, which there might be between Gary and I at this point, then, you know, I certainly think you could probably get the gist of it if it was carefully chosen. You could get the gist of it, you know, with 20 minutes or an hour, sadly.
Mendon recently said, I know, let's just stick to 90-second, you know, videos. And it seemed a little bit short to me, and I got to 90 seconds or a little bit more as time progressed, but it seemed Mendon didn't actually make any effort to interact with any of that within the bounds of what he'd suggested.
Yeah,
and
I'm sympathetic with that.
Yeah,
because all of this stuff requires discipline, and what we want is a way that doesn't require discipline. Like, for example, I want a debate site where, or an app where, you know, those rules, whether if it's a 90-second debate or a 2-minute debate, or everybody can talk at the same time, or cussing, you know, is a foul, or whatever the rules, you set those, and the guy that creates it, maybe the same person that's created one of these committees or councils, award juries, you know, defines those rules, and when you sign up, you know you're going to have a 90-second video, and the application only gives you 90 seconds in that mode. And maybe it's programmed so that in step 2 it goes up to 1.5 minutes. Maybe step 3 is 2 people live talking back and forth like we are. You know what I mean? And you have an app that knows how to do video snippets, and it also knows how to do live video, and it combines a live debate with extracting video snippets, you know, for the award, not for the QuickTime reel. So we have somebody showed up. Who was that there?
Saw somebody.
Oh, yes, it's the Truth Quest again.
Just on chat.
So I forgot to put up the link until about 15 minutes ago. So. But I mean, I didn't put it up because I wanted to have a private conversation for a while. That's what I meant. Damn. See, never admit you're wrong. So okay, I'm thinking that we're having the hour come up. So let's choose a topic that will. What kind of topic would you talk about? I have a couple other things, many things. Plus,
I'm easy. I mean, I was on.
You want to talk about?
I was on the verge of making some physics videos.
Well, let's talk about some science, but I had an idea that we could, we were just talking about trying to understand someone else's idea, other than it being wrong or before or without worrying about if it's wrong. And let's talk about some science. We'll talk about our ideas, but also I'd like to touch on if you and I could figure out what Gary is even trying to say. Separate from the fact that some of the things he said I could tell are wrong or seem wrong or I don't like. What is it? What he's even getting at? What's he hoping to accomplish with that? But that won't take the whole conversation. I mean, let's talk about some science. And I thought maybe we could talk about it.
I have a very, very, very good understanding of what Gary's trying to say now, and do with his antinatalist and ethicalist philosophy. But,
oh, well, maybe we could go into that too, but then that'll make Gary the subject. So maybe Gary is possibly on the agenda himself. Making himself. See, that's the thing. Gary, by being so opinionated and the way Gary is, he becomes a reference point, right? Anybody that stands their ground that much suddenly is like, at least they're a reference point, no matter what.
Yeah. Well, he contributes, I guess, to so much, and he's been around so long, so he's like you say, he's a landmark, isn't he? A reference point.
I think in my views of life, I've always thought that to be or not to be, or like Camus says, suicide is really the main philosophical question. I believe that, and I think all of these now years of discussion about antinatalism and cynicism, they've really clarified for me what I think about life and what I am vis-a-vis natalism, because I'm not a natalist like the Bible, go forth and multiply. I'm a pro-choicist when it comes to natalism. I do believe, but more than that, I decided, okay, I am natalist in that I do think it's sometimes the right decision to go ahead and have kids, as opposed to saying I don't even know if it ever is the right. I think sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. Usually, probably it's done for wrong reasons because of the whole biological imperative of it. So, but it's been very useful to me, that whole debate, again, as a reference point for someone to so clearly take that kind of position. It's like it can be a floodlight from over where they're standing onto, you know, where does that cast shadows in my own position? What is it? Well, because I'm pretty cynical myself. So finding out in what sense I'm pro the whole living game is a tricky thing. It's pretty subtle for me because, you know, I'm on the same page with look at the horrors and the oppression and will human nature ever be its beautiful potential or whatnot.
Exactly,
So,
we both are, but we both say ultimately it's their choice. You know, we see the personal choice side of things as a higher priority, a more substantive, right, moral goal, you know, than, you know, what one might pull your face at.
Really? Okay, because let me just ask you again what you were just saying, because I feel my one-line answer here to the antinatalism debate is I'm pro-choice. It's the same issue as abortion, pro-choice to me. It's totally a personal and medical. A part of your body is able to grow a new part of your body that eventually will have its own personality, but no time soon will it be independent. So it's a pro-choice. That's really my answer. I can't answer whether you should or shouldn't.
But can you logically justify that pro-choice answer? I mean, Gary would just say it's nothing to do with it. Okay, I hear you, and I've worked out a logic which says once I understand the value, then that very logic just extrapolates.
Yeah, but that's another issue. That's the whole issue of objective reason versus subjective and relativistic reasoning from facts that have information content that includes noise. My idea of what we're doing is we're processing information, and there's always a signal to noise ratio that's governed a lot by our inability to have more sensitive, you know, measurements.
How you justify.
But I don't have. Why do I have to justify? I don't have a worldview where I have to prove things that I believe in that sense.
Oh, so you're just saying you're of the opinion that pro-choice is a good thing, but you're not actually saying it's actually correct. It's just
it's similar to the fact that if somebody comes and tries to steal from my house, I will fight them off. I have made that decision. It's a personal decision that I believe that I can justify to myself my need to do that, and part of that. From that gives myself. I've decided to make that a fair thing. I give that to other agents, that they also have their freedom of choice and to defend their position from encroachments that are clearly would be in violation in my non-hypocritical view, and thus other people get agency, and from their agency they have autonomous medical rights and can decide whether or not they get a heart surgery or a brain surgery or take medicine, you know, and including whether they grow new life forms or abort those new life forms. That will be a personal decision, just like there was a time and certain people that think it's a moral decision whether you go get a heart surgery or not, or just don't feel like doing it for some reason.
But it sounds like you're going back to the original.
Well, I do have a line of reasoning, and I'm telling you it comes from my own belief in my own personal autonomy and my decision to grant autonomy to others in a like-kind way because I see them as like and kind to me, because I'm part of a group. We share DNA. There's definitely establishment that we're within groups, so we can have, how do I treat myself? How do I treat my dogs and my dishes and my property, or how do I treat other living beings? You know, and you have to answer that question. Now, I can't prove that you should treat other beings as though they're autonomous. If somebody wants to not do that, then we're just down to, well, what kind of interaction are we going to have?
Would you say that's fair enough? You have qualified it. Would you say that's strong enough to say that line of reasoning that you hold is tends to, would it be as strong to say it's an objective moral fact that you know, that you have to respect this?
I don't understand. It's so confusing to me why my position seems so confusing. I mean, look, I'm saying we get all of our information through our senses. When I read a book, I'm actually getting that through my eyes. If I listen to the book on tape, I'm listening through my ear. And those both introduce biases, by the way, because they're entering the brain through different processing means. Right? So I'm getting all this information. It's just like TV cameras and sensors. There's noise and bias and amplification, remapping, decoding stuff. There's a lot of JPEG, lossy compression. Okay. Boom. Where does that turn into objective? It doesn't. It's called reducing information. Now, when you reduce information, you can find a thing that you could call signal that is different from a thing that you call noise. And you can find systematics causing the signal and more or less thermodynamics causing the noise. And so you can find information in there, but at no point does anything ever become perfectly, like, you could say it's absolutely this or that or the other, but no, it's limited by time and space, your metrics of your machine, your knowledge of a particular parameter space.
So you'd character, I just check this, you'd characterize it as you couldn't say that it was objective. And
no, I would say that it's subjective, but I have to be careful saying that because it's important to realize that we are inherently subjective creatures. When we call something objective, we're just saying the stuff we know, the feelings we have due to the signal.
Yeah.
But we're not very good information processors, so we get that wrong all the time. We are apathenic.
You're just making an argument, presuming I don't get that, though. I mean,
well, I'm not presuming. I thought you did get it, and then you asked me about it, and I'm always confused. It's like...
Yeah, no, I was checking. That was my way of surmising and saying...
Yeah, no, well, you're right. No, that's the angle I'm coming from.
And then you justified it more, and it was like, no, we'll not have that discussion. If I understand you well enough, then we'll not take it that
well, but I'm not wrong in this, right? You do have more of an objective thing. There's like you and me and Gary have a little spectrum. You are more on Gary's side of, yes, there should be one way to figure it out, right?
Yeah, because let's just say, for argument's sake, you have this objective morality, and the question would be is, say Inmendham or myself grants that, yeah, you've got a logical line of reasoning to say, oh, personal choice is worth something. The question is then, and this is, I've tried to bring this up with Gary to some degree, is how do you, if you see his value, if you grant him his value premise equation and extrapolate from that, how do you reconcile the two? And I would say that logically, if they reach opposite conclusions, then one of them ain't logical, or both. Yeah. So that would have been something I would have liked to got into with Gary, and I've tried to press. But anyway, hi Inventive, we've seen you there. It's, Inventive came along. Have you seen him?
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, I couldn't find the link at first, so I came a little late.
Sorry, I meant to put it right away, but then Heithley just in his enchanting conversation, I forgot.
Yeah,
but it's up there now. I wish there was a way for it to automatically be public. I don't know if there's a way to do that. I was looking into. I know there's a way to have Hangouts, like for business purposes, where they're in the calendar and it's just always the same link. It's just like a room. If you went there, and that's what I'd really like. You have a room, you could put it on a web page. If people forget it, they just, Google the web page, click on it, boom, you're right in there. If nobody else is in there, then yeah, Google's actually creating it, but it just looks like there's always a room. And if anybody knows how to do that, I would like to know. And then we wouldn't have to worry so much about publishing the link. But
presumably it's public, yeah? When it says
yes, it says public, but have you ever found one when people have these? How do you find the link?
Don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's semi-public. It means people can go in, but it's the sharing the link, like the private videos that are public if you have the links type of idea. Okay,
yeah,
so
I came in before and I could see you guys talking, but I couldn't get in. Right, like when I clicked on the
what I'm trying to do is
automatic one. Yeah.
I'm always trying to put the link. You have to put the link, and as far as I know, you have to get it from. It's not in the links thing here in Hangout, but at the top on in the Mac, it has a URL above this screen we're at, and I publish that, and then that allows people to come in. So, all right, I need to declare a 5-minute break, and when we come back, let's talk about some physics.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Well, you need a break, but me and Harvest can chat.
We'll keep the airwaves going.
How's it hanging?
It's good. I've been meaning to get back to you, but I've been busy. I want to make you know in the last video you kind of said we need to start with purpose, and I think that's right. That's rightly so. So I think I'd make a video about purpose at some point. I got that cool video camera back, so I don't have to be on this webcam to make the video. So that'll be nice.
Yeah. I had made a video reply to you, hadn't I? But you started re-uploading your migrating, I guess, your videos from you had the idea that you do the chatty stuff on Inventive BS, and I take it you've thought of that idea now.
Well, and Mendham was kind of, he always has his humor, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, you invent bullshit," and I just thought that was hilarious, right? So I thought I'd change my channel name, but I don't really have any subscribers anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And I thought they kept calling me Inventive Harvest. I think he just prefers that better.
Yeah.
So I gave in to social pressure, and I just went back to Inventive Harvest.
Yeah, I did. Unnecessary confusion for my part. I thought I'm just sticking with your old name.
There you go.
I mean, Hythlodays, if you Google it, I mean, it essentially means, bullshit. I think I forgot now what it says, but so it is taking a light-hearted look at one's own opinions, but Inventive BS, yeah. It's too readily apparent that you're going to get lambasted, I think. Somebody else joined the Truth Queue, the Truth Quest. All right. Are you with us, Truth?
In the chat, he said he'd be back in a second. Oh, there he is.
Have you read his comments about what is it about having kids if you can afford them?
I think it's good for a parent to be responsible for their kids. I think he's going a little farther. He says it doesn't give you the right to have kids. I think he may be siding with the antinatalists. I don't really know. Truth Quest.
Well, I understand what's the word? The intuition that you think you have to, but I think the personal decision is of more importance, because once you start saying one class of people aren't fit enough to have children, I mean, the inequality between the rich and the poor is great now, but it's like you're saying, this underclass doesn't have the right to procreate. I understand the sentiment totally, that this underclass seemingly is trapped, but that's the problem. That's the thing that needs fixing. That the fact that if you have kids without money, that they don't have much of a future is the problem. Not don't have kids. Then you've got to fix the problem, not the symptom. From a rights point of view. Anyhow, that's my view to the Truth Quest, I think.
Well, yeah, the pro-choice thing is people have the choice, and if you decide to live, then you have to help with the problem. And if you decide not to live, then we owe it to you to make it as easy as possible to decide. And that's it. But, okay, science.
Right,
we're on 5 minutes, just like I said. Wow.
You were 5 minutes.
Okay, so can we try this in the way I was saying, where I want to ask you your position, what the significance, and find out more about your position, because you also have your own theory. To me, I see more of a chance that yours is mathematically rectifiable, because you're going in this direction of quantum and discrete space, and there is a quantum discrete math solution, I think, even though it's not established yet, possibly at least. And then also, but your understanding of Gary's, because I honestly am not entirely sure where he's trying to go with that. So, and then I'll try my best not to say you're right or wrong or what I think on your position, other than what I think your position is, unless you ask me. If you want to ask me, does that violate a known law of physics, then that's your problem, okay? I will then let loose.
Yeah,
but, okay, and totally in a non-trap way. I mean, the problem with the method is you might feel interrogated, so just tell me, but, you know, I'm not in...
As long as we understand the situation, and I'm totally happy with being questioned as far as I can.
Okay, so
let's... I'll openly admit the bits I don't know, or I'll admit, oh yeah, there's a contradiction there maybe, and yeah, I'm happy for that.
Okay, so let me ask you this then, and this is something I don't know. I'll just start with something difficult that I don't get about Gary's thing. So with Gary's model, my understanding is on some level he's trying to prove that the two-slit experiment is a bunch of hocus, or somehow he has some other way that it could be working. But I don't see any commentary at all on an alternate way that it's working that ends up with the same mathematics. He's trying to say that, oh, the mathematics will be the same. Well, it wouldn't. The mechanism is different. The mathematics has changed.
Right. Well, when I said I understood Gary's position, I was talking about antinatalism and...
oh, okay. I thought you meant the physics of it. Yeah, I just don't get what he's trying to say.
I've been trying to follow, and I've made comments and...
You did debate with him.
In video, that there are specific areas where, to my mind, I'm following with the basic idea, but I am getting lost in the details, because part of the problem is, and he admits it, he admitted it recently, that he uses the word electron when he means photon and such like, and I in the past haven't been entirely sure whether... Sometimes it was obvious that it was a slip of the tongue, like we all do, like he says we all do, and we do. But in certain circumstances, it hasn't been entirely obvious to me whether it was a slip of the tongue, or no, he was really forgetting what he formally said, and that he was. So I got a bit confused in some of his videos between his use of the word photon, electron, and graviton, because he was saying that photons were the cause of gravity, and then later on in various videos, sometimes he would slip on, well, the graviton is coming in, you know, and I would go, oh, and that would make it hard for me to question. But
well, what about your system then? Okay, so what's the difference between a photon and an electron in your system?
Well, I don't have a system. My system is.
You have a system.
Pardon?
Okay, fine. You don't have a system.
I have a system. My system is.
Well, you don't believe in continuous space. That's systematic.
My system is accepting the body of physics as it stands.
Right. In
terms of its predictions, and that the fact that it is a mathematical theory. What I have struck with and object to is sometimes too often seeing mechanism in that stated mathematics. Yeah, that's one thing. The problem I have with there is a problem with continuousness and infinity, right? Philosophically and, you know, mathematically, physically, whatever you want to say it. There is a problem to be addressed with continuity.
Sorry.
Oh, hi, Gary.
I'll fix this. Mute me somehow.
Sometimes too often.
Well, that's how it works. Oh yeah, you can mute yourself.
But there's also problems with discreteness, and I made a video sort of outlining some of these problems. And so I like to get back to basics, and this is what I was thinking about earlier, is, you know, what does it mean? You know, Emendon would characterize things as balls, kinetic balls bouncing off each other. But the question that, in a way, I believe we can never find out the mechanism. Yeah, I think that actually the mathematics is all we'll ever get to, and I think if we say to ourselves that it's balls bouncing off each other, it begs the question where the balls come from. How is it that they're so perfect?
The question, it's an easier answer than the where does the magic come from? Come on, it's not. It doesn't change the origin question at all.
Yeah, let me finish. But the point is, it does, whether it's an easier question or most, that's another. But I do ask, where's all the balls come from? Why they're so regular? And how do they impart force? Yeah, how do they know where? Okay, because they touch. Yeah, it works macroscopically, but how does it know to go off at this angle? Yeah, and work in a vector equation, if you like. The vector mathematics, which says if I impact at 45 degrees, it will go off 45 degrees, and this will go off at 45 degrees. Are these balls carrying about somehow the information about where they need to be next? Yeah, and you know, those are and to me, if you keep burrowing down, you end up equally with magical questions as you do with quantum mechanics. Maybe not equally, but certainly big problems. So I like to shrug my shoulders and just say the best we'll ever know is the informational representation and being able to make predictions. If we can philosophically accept, you know, like the bias talk that we talked about, understanding that philosophically, that'll be somewhere of worthy getting, in my opinion.
So,
okay, well, my opinion is exactly opposite. I only came to the room because you were misparaphrasing my science. It just sort of irritates me, because I think I've made enough videos not to be misparaphrased. And the two times that I've used the word photon instead of proton or electron instead of photon is hardly a catastrophic error. So, I mean, that's just...
Oh, well, that's right. I wasn't supposed to make an argument.
Come back on this.
They're both fundamental particles.
I didn't even try to be characterized. I said it was my opinion that I was having confusion problems.
He did say that, yeah.
I did not at all try to represent your physics.
I understand. There's no way to please a person like that, then. There's
But
no
what does it
way
matter?
to please somebody like that, then. There's no way to explain anything to you, then, if I'm not allowed to make trivial errors.
I think he allows that trivial error.
And I said they were fine, but I said
He did.
I said I was having trouble.
Too confusing. I don't see how you can fucking say it's too confusing.
I'm not bullied.
I'm here to clarify so you can talk while I'm not here. How about that? I have 5 fucking minutes.
Yeah, don't.
5 minutes.
Hold on,
So
you
you
guys.
don't just paraphrase it, and then you...
Okay, I can take control of things. Just calm down.
Calm down. You're forever.
What is the difference anyway? There isn't a big difference between the electron and the photon. They both react the same way in the two-slit experiment. The only difference is their wavelength, and one's a boson and one's a fermion.
One has a million electrons in it, and one of them has a million photons in it, and one of them has 1 photon. A school of fish is not a fish. Okay, the photon is the fish. The electron is a school of fish. It's a big, huge difference between how the two are going to behave. Big, huge difference.
A high-energy photon could be said to have...
There's no such thing. I don't even concede the existence of it. Can I just clarify my position?
Don't concede the
Can I just clarify my position and get the fuck out of here? Because there's obviously no way for us to communicate, okay? We want to talk about 2 separate subjects. I just want to make sure my position is clear.
Well, I want to know that.
Experiment, I'm saying it's the same exact mathematics, because exactly the same variables are going to be used. The width of the slits, the distance from the target, the wavelength of the light going in, and the electron's existence. Okay, electrons and photons as pairs of wavelengths react. Electrons react to wavelengths of light. They do not react to any photon. They react to specific photons. Some light will go right through them, right past them. Some light will not. My argument is that the electrons there's a static electric charge that is created in the two-slit experiment, and that the photons are interacting with the static electric electrons on the surface of the two-slit experiment, and that's what's diffracting the light. It's exactly the same variables would go into any mathematics. On the second point about my gravitation theory, I don't think this is too complicated. I'm saying photons are the only thing, the material thing, the kernel of the existence of everything in the universe. Everything is made of photons. All of them are moving the speed of light. I'm saying frequency is just an illusion of period. That's all it is. The photons carry no other function. They don't carry any magnetic component. They carry no wave component. There are bits of energy that travel from point A to point B in a straight line, and they don't do anything else unless something influences them to do something else. The theory of gravitation is that the gravitation is polarized, and that creates magnetism and electricity. If you watch my last video on electricity, it's pretty damn clear what's going on. If you know anything about field theories, all fields are created by polarized gravity, essentially. Okay? And all those fields, that's why there's no field inside of a container when it's electrified. That's why all that stuff works. I will give you math, but it's going to be, again, the fact is that every single one of these follows the inverse square rule, which is a light rule, which has to do with things traveling in straight lines. That's another thing. All energy that comes off of an electric field comes off perpendicular to the field lines. Why is it perpendicular? It's perpendicular because photons travel in a straight line, and so do gravitons. And so it's all gravitons. They're the ones pushing magnets apart. They're the ones turning motors.
I have a question.
All gravitons.
You said you do not acknowledge the existence of high-energy photons. Is that right?
I don't acknowledge the existence of anything other than frequency. Yes, there are photons that have a period. Okay, those with a close period have more energy.
Photons have energy.
More of them per second will travel through something. If it has a tight period, if it has a 4 nanosecond period, then obviously there's going to be a ton of them going through past.
But I'm asking about an individual photon. They have
There's
energy.
no such thing as an individual photon in the sense that there is no high energy photon. There's one kind of photon. One. There's one. One kind. One.
Then it seems like you're using the word photon for something else besides what we know
I
a
have
photon
to
is.
use the word that exists. Okay. What I'm saying is that photons are basically gravitons that have a frequency. So if we can do it that way, to clarify things, to make it as clear as possible, I'm saying every single bit of real matter in the universe is a thing that moves from point A to point B in a straight line at the speed of light. It's all gravitons, and the ones that have a frequency are called photons. How's that? So
when Hythloday says you want to have BBs bumping into each other, that doesn't sound like BBs bumping into each other. It sounds like a highly advanced, like any of these field theories. I don't see the BBs.
I guess you haven't listened to my videos. I have.
They don't make sense to me.
It's all kinetic. I'm saying it's all kinetic. It's all just photons hitting it's all gravitons hitting gravitons, and the thing that makes a difference is the ones that are trapped in electrons produce gravitons at a frequency, and they also polarize them.
Okay, so the graviton, is that an overused word, or you mean that this is radiated by a gravitational body?
I'm meaning that it's particulates of they're the quanta in the universe. Okay. We exist in a high pressure area of the universe where there's a huge density of these gravitons, and they are traveling through us in the gazillions per second. Gazillions of them are traveling through us right now, from all directions. Gravity is a shadowing effect.
So is like a photon that I think of as a photon, like a blue photon of a certain wavelength, that is what? A bunch of these quanta / gravitons, what you're calling gravitons?
With a frequency, yes. Can I say it any clearer? It's simple.
Well, is it a number of them? Is it some number of those?
The number of them is going to be its intensity. I'm not breaking any of those rules. The number of them is going to decide the intensity of the radiation or the light.
So a photon flying through space is like a stream of BBs, you know, maybe with a little pattern of to how they're spread out.
Exactly, exactly. And they're probably in clumps of what, from 10 to 50 to 100, and then they come again at a slightly different angle and a slightly different angle. And obviously when we see something, we're not paying attention to tiny fractions of a zillion millimeters of a distance in the path. But I'm just saying they're obviously not being produced at a constant rate. They're being produced by different electrons in the substance producing them, and they're coming at slightly different angles, but the angles are so slight that we consider it a constant stream of light, even though it's not truly a constant stream of light.
So when an atom absorbs a photon, this little stream of BBs would hit it, and that's what causes it to go into an energetic state.
Yeah, it absorbs the energy, gets bigger, okay? It gets bigger, it gets unstable, and so then it waits to release that energy in some form so it'll go back to its native, more stable state.
Is there a reason that it has to absorb the whole little chain of them?
I think it only absorbs them when it's the light of a certain frequency, as I stated. So yeah, I think it's only absorbing them in packets of 2 as pairs, and it releases them as packets of 2 as pairs.
Why?
Why? Because of the structure of the electron. Okay, I don't know the exact structure, but it has an orbit, it has a period. So what happens is the energy goes in, it creates a distortion in the path of the electron. Then when the second hit comes, it comes at just the right period to cause a further deflection in the electron's path, which makes it unstable, and so then it flips its own frequency of photons, leaves it because it's been made unstable. So it releases an amount of energy contingent on the amount of energy that distorted its path, and so it's trying to get back to a neutral path because it's basically trapped in a magnetic and gravitational tension. Okay, the idea is that the protons inside the atom convert gravitons into polarized positive gravitons. The electron is converting, the ones that go through the electron are converting exactly the opposite, so they're caught in a magnetic field, and that's creating tension between them. So there's gravity pushing the electron in, and there's electrical force pushing the electron out. So it's in a constant state of tension, and anything that disturbs that tension is going to sit there and create a disruption. The disruption creates an ejection of a photon, and if it jumps to another energy level, it's the absorption of photons.
But
so what's the
electron and photon? The electron and proton is made out of these very same gravitons and photons. And what is it?
Polarization. The gravitons are polarized when they interact with the electron, and they're polarized when they interact with the proton. So they're polarized plus, and they're polarized horizontal to vertical. And it is the electrons are susceptible to the horizontal ones. The protons are susceptible to the vertical ones, and that's what creates the force.
But if these are balls, what does it mean to be polarized?
They're spherical balls, okay? I didn't say they were balls. I'm just saying kinetically they act as if they're balls, okay? They are acting in a purely kinetic environment, okay? They go in with a certain directional information. They leave with directional information. There's no exchange of energy is my point of bringing up kinetics. There's no exchange of energy, okay? That's the point that's emphasized. There's no exchange of energy. The only thing they exchange is direction. Can you understand that?
Can I ask a question?
Cool.
Okay, so what is I don't see the impact on the two-slit experiment, or more generally, what are the distinctions that you are making between your system?
There's no wave function. I'm saying there's no Heisenberg principle. I am saying those are two pretty big ones right there, aren't they? I mean, that's a pretty big distinction, isn't it?
But you're saying the same thing happens in the two-slit experiment.
Well, I'm saying that obviously the same thing happens, because I'm not saying the thing doesn't happen. But what I'm saying, it's being caused by diffraction. It's being caused by the vibration of electrons. Electrons are the moving part. The photon is trying to go from point A to point B in a straight line. The electron is changing its path.
Well, I mean, I think that's standard physics, that it's the electrons on the edge of the materials in that slit that is bending the light.
Well, if that's standard physics, what do you need the wave function for?
Because the point is that it's bent at both slits, and there's one particle can only go through one slit.
That is completely unnecessary. If you're going to say the photons are being that they're interacting with the electrons of the slits, you don't need to do the math with both slits. You have absolutely no need to do that. You can draw the same freaking you can draw the same triangle to the target, get the same probabilistic answer without putting 2 points in on both slits. You don't need the 2 slits to create the angle, because the angle is going to be created by the wavelength of the light.
Well, that's where I say you have to do the math, because...
Well, you don't have to do it, because it's the same exact variables. Why should I
Gary, the whole argument...
You're going to tell me that I have to redo the math in this stupid, idiotic way, where all I'm going to say, instead of doing the tangent of the triangle, you have to do the sine of the triangle.
The point is that if you close one slit and shine the light through, you get a pattern. And if you close the alternate one and shine it through, you get another pattern. And on the screen, if you left the same screen up, there'd be the overlap pattern of both of those slits open on their own. When you open both of them, the pattern, at the same time, the pattern changes, and that's what has to be explained.
Well, I know, but I've already been over...
One-slit mathematics does not explain that. Well, you can go over it a million times. One slit...
You're going to keep going. You're going to keep talking like I haven't gone.
One slit doesn't do it. One slit does not explain it. That's why we have this theory.
Well, if you look at the math, okay, you don't watch
I have looked at the math.
You don't watch my damn videos, and you're going to inquire to me about videos I've already made. Okay, I did a video based on this guy who makes these lectures, a physics professor in California. He did the math for the one slit experiment and talked exactly about a diffraction pattern being created by one slit.
Yes.
All right.
Nobody denies that. That's called diffraction.
Yeah. Well, the point is that you can't imagine that there could be overlapping, that when you interact with electrons on one side of the slit, that you would disturb the electrons on the other side of the slit. You can't theoretically imagine that would be a possibility, that once a photon goes through a field and is diffracted by an electron, that it might change the field energy a little bit.
Yes, I can imagine that, but... I can imagine that, but if you block the slit, the electrons are still over there in that slit. You just don't let the light go through it, and
it has a diffraction pattern, right? So you block one slit, and there's still a diffraction pattern. And according to this California physicist, there's a substantial diffraction pattern, not a blob of light that they keep showing in every goddamn experiment I've seen. Every experiment I've seen, when they block one slit, they just show a constant beam of light. Well, by his mathematics, it's not supposed to be a constant beam of light. It's supposed to be a pattern.
Yeah, you have the diffraction pattern. Exactly.
With one slit, I'm saying one slit. You understand the word one slit?
Yeah, I understand the word one slit. I understand that you get, when you have a telescope of sufficient power, you get diffraction rings there too, because of the one slit that's the circle.
It doesn't matter. I'm just saying that obviously the experimental results don't match his math, is my point. So I'm not the one that has to dissect the two-slit experiment. What I'm saying is the two-slit experiment needs to be done in a clinical, scientific manner, because his math doesn't match most of the two-slit experiments on the internet. If you're going to tell me that most of the two-slit experiments on the internet are showing a diffraction pattern when one slit is covered, so one slit is open, you're going to tell me that most two-slit experiments on the internet show a diffraction pattern? They do not show that.
I don't care what most show. I know that in physics... I have to
argue based on what I have access to, Piero. I can't argue what I don't have access to.
Okay, well, you're not arguing against the likes of Feynman and then as you present then, because nobody is saying that there isn't diffraction. Diffraction is a well-known phenomena. It's a wave phenomena. It's why we think light is waves.
It isn't happening. Dr. Quantum says it isn't happening. The most viewed physics video on the internet says it isn't happening.
No, he didn't talk about diffraction not happening.
Yeah, he did. When one slit is covered, he said the balls all go in real circle.
That's interference that isn't happening.
They don't make a diffraction pattern, they make a circle.
Can I ask Gary a question?
Dr. Quantum's bullshit. I'm not going to be put in the place of Dr. Quantum.
I'm just saying, I have to argue based on what evidence exists out there.
Okay, I get it. Your system is distinct from Dr. Quantum.
I'm saying the physicists are contradicting themselves there.
Stop saying Feynman then if you mean Dr. Quantum, please. I'd appreciate that.
Gary, as I understand it, your
This is a minor part of my theory. To tell you the goddamn truth, this is nothing, okay? My theory is that gravity is causing magnetism and electricity, which is the fucking unification theory, which is the big news, okay? The fact that the quantum thing is bullshit just because it's a silly explanation that photons are riding on a wave that no one's ever seen. But anyway, go ahead if you want to argue two-slit crap.
Gary, as I understand it, you're proposing that the sides of the slits are interacting such that they're producing the patterns that are shown, yeah? So the question is I don't see how that explanation accounts for regions where they cancel each other out, yeah? As described in the classic two-slit experiment.
Well, they can't cancel each other out anyway, because that's a theoretical impossibility for two photons to cancel each other out, because there's no medium they're traveling through, so there's no wave. So obviously that's some theoretical thing where the photon pretends to cancel itself out and then decides to go somewhere else. So that's
the regions
that's purely theoretical nonsense that there's an actual cancellation, because there's obviously not an actual cancellation because photons can't be destroyed.
Exactly, but there's a region that these, in your random interactions from the side of the slit, how does that explain these regions where...
I've brought up before Newton's glass experiments, okay, because they're really important, right? Because what happens is things travel a longer distance through the glass, they reflect at different angles, okay? So it completely distorts the image, or it completely compensates. So exactly, a light beam goes through at an angle, and somehow through the depth of the glass it ends up refracting, compensating, so all the light ends up going to a single target. All right, so you have both of those effects, right? And that's basically what we talk about with lensing, right? It has to do with the distance the the photon travels, right? So if you can imagine a photon taking 2 rounds around an electron before it gets ejected, or 1 round around an electron, right? Wouldn't that be more distance? That would be more time. It would be released at a different moment in the electron's vibration, which would cause it to end up at a target at a different with a different probabilistic outcome, correct? So obviously, if more photons are going where the beam is, then they have to be going somewhere else, not going somewhere else. So the fact that there are blank spots has just nothing, has only to do with the fact that more photons are being refracted at that other angle, because they're obviously, because of the mechanism of the electron's vibration, being moved in different parts of the electron cycle. The electron has a cycle. It moves faster going out than it goes back in. See? It's not about a wave, it's about the thing that causes a wave. And I've made this argument about sound, that sound is created by sonic booms, that you have to move faster to create a wave. A wave has to be initiated by a force moving faster than the wave travels at.
Can I ask Heitzlide a question? Are you saying, you said, it sounded like maybe you agreed that the points of interference where there isn't any light, that the light can't actually cancel, 2 photons can't actually overlap and cancel each other out?
I was agreeing in terms of understanding.
Understanding, okay, yeah. Because, I mean, with sound, do you not believe in the science of...
Don't bring up sound. Sound isn't a medium. There's a real cancellation of material items. Material energy is canceled out. There is no medium in the universe. You cannot destroy photons.
There's an electromagnetic. There is an electromagnetic medium. There is an electromagnetic field. That is what is pushing and pulling.
Made out of what? Yeah, magic dust. Okay.
Well, what's your little balls made out of? Fish? It's the thing that makes other stuff. It doesn't matter what they're made out of. At least they're discrete. Well, the matter in your case, it does matter.
They're not a fake medium made out of
nothing. Well, it doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter then what the field is.
Nothing. Yeah, the fake medium warps and bends.
Yeah, except for that I can measure it. I can measure the electric and magnetic field.
Yeah, you can measure them. Because it's made out of something.
I can measure them.
Yeah, but they're made out of something. That's right. Because they're made out of something.
Yeah. They exist, and magnets actually touch each other without touching each other. I think I can pretty much show that magnetism's real.
And I've just pointed out that my theory makes it really real. Not a fake thing in a fake medium. You can't call something real when you have no definition of its function. You have no definition of its function at all. No hardware, no superstructure, no mechanism whatsoever. Just a phantom made-up force.
No, I could tell what the field is by shooting electrons through there, and since they're also magnetic, I can
It's
measure
still
their
made out of
deflection and know
nothing.
exactly.
Still made out of nothing.
As I understand it, I've seen you explain it about the the regions where the electron doesn't get to with one slit. But if it was the case that electrons and photons can't cancel each other out, when you open the other slit, you'd get what you call the sum of those those piles, right? But what you don't get isn't the sum of those piles. What you get apparently looks like interference of waves.
I know, but you do get this stuff because they have one example, the two-slit experiments, where they actually did one of the things I suggested, which would put a barrier in front of the two slits. And they move the barrier across the two-slit experiment, right? That's all they do. They just move a barrier right in front of the two slits. All right? And when they did that experiment, they had the photographs, and you can see in the photographs, okay, that it really is the two single slits transposed on top of each other.
It
and it's
isn't,
only
though.
because of the intensity of the light that makes it more visible. It's obviously that one has the inverse of the other, so the two of them, when you match them up, they come up with a clearer and more definitive line. But I'm just saying, I did a video on it. You can
You did it by your eyesight. I mean, I looked at it mathematically. It's not the same pattern. It's provably not the same pattern. It's not even worth arguing about.
Well, you can say it's not worth arguing about.
Well, you just saw it on a video. That's not a very good resolution.
Besides the photographic evidence, Piero. No proof in that experiment besides the photographic evidence.
Look, I'm more concerned with this. There could be a magnet over here, and it pulls this strong on this point. And if I put another magnet over here, it pulls this strong in the opposite direction. You don't think those can cancel out? You don't think that could cancel out those two things?
I'm saying that yes, the magnets work exactly like gravity, okay? So that whatever influences they have end up getting combined, just like the electromagnetic force. And all of it is the inverse square rule, which is the shadowing rule.
So yes,
the force is made out of gravitons, you fucktard. How many times can I say that? It's a real thing, not a fake thing.
So the gravitons that shoot out from the planet pull you, no, you believe there's something else spreading out of all space that pushes you towards the objects that don't block them. That's the theory, right?
No, it's that there's a ton of photons coming from
every
point in space. From every point in space. Okay, graviton, photon, for practical purposes, it's the same thing. It's a quanta.
Yeah,
whatever. I'll call it a graviton, and I'll try to say that forever. No, but I'm not going to suit you.
Okay, well, it's not a graviton. You're talking about something else.
Yeah,
maybe you're trying to obfuscate.
Every point in space, they're coming from every point in space all around us, trillions and zillions and billions of them, and they go through every piece of matter that exists. They are holding the atoms together. That's how many of them there are. They are so dense in the universe that they push atoms together. But when they go through us, okay, they don't push us. They change the directional energy, our position of our matter. They reorient our electric field, so to speak, and create velocity. We produce our own velocity because it transfers directional information. It does not transfer physical energy. It transfers information. Angles. This
is the theory is an alternate to what? Everything modern, everything from Einstein on. It's Newton reinvented is your idea that this brings Newtonian mechanics back.
Lestrange came up with the theory, okay? So, I mean, it's a particle theory of gravity that's been around for 200 years. And it was discounted merely because Lestrange didn't know that there was atoms and that there was a frictionless environment that atoms function in. He didn't know that. If he would have known that, he could have defended his theory. But he couldn't defend it because he didn't know there could be a kinetic universe, okay, with it where these particles interacted. He didn't know the speed of light. He didn't know gravity would be the same as light.
So for centuries, people respected Newton and thought he'd figured out basically how everything works. And so your theory is that in the beginning of the 20th century or something, just a bunch of cool hip kids thought it'd be cool to dog on Newton, and that's it. No science since Newton, really.
Well, it's science, but it's bad science. Yeah, it's a completely wrong assumption. I mean, they drew a wrong conclusion. okay, where they went with a force theory and a wave theory instead of a particle theory. Einstein tried to defend a particle theory, and then he eventually abdicated too and became some guy who bends space around.
Can I just interject on this idea of kinetic interactions? If it's an actual object, does it not have to be spherical in terms of, you know, like if it was cubic, it wouldn't bounce off in a predictable way?
It's a point particle, okay? I'm not going to give it a dimension. I'm not going to give it a shape beyond saying it's polarizable, okay?
But
so
that's
you can
not very
change its
Newtonian.
orientation like a photon. You can change its orientation, okay? But it's basically just a point of energy. It's a particle.
But that's not Newtonian, Gary. It sounds like you're trying to make a new
I don't care what you call it
Feynman did.
Newtonian. All I'm saying is it behaves kinetically. It interacts with other things in a purely kinetic manner
infinitely
without
small,
exchange.
how's it bump
It
into
can't change its speed. Can you understand this?
Yes, I
photon
can.
can't
You're just
change its
you're
speed.
just trying to avoid the
It can't
question.
change
though.
its.
Answer
Oh,
the
I'm
question.
sorry. I'm not deflecting anything. I'm saying if you have a mechanism that can't change its speed, okay, what else does it have? If it can't get smaller, it can't get bigger, it can't change its speed, what else can it exchange in a reaction?
But you
It's
just
all
said you
in the
wouldn't
same
commit to it
direction.
having a size, right? Did you not just say it might not have a size? It might be point.
I don't care what. I don't care.
Don't care.
Do you understand the word? I don't care what size it is. I don't care what particular. You can make it into a penis. I don't care how you describe its shape. All I'm saying is it does this particular. These are the rules. It travels.
Well,
at the
here I
speed of
care
light
because
and
if you're
no
going to claim
other-
Newtonian,
it travels at the speed of light and no other speed. It always maintains the same mass, and it is polarizable. Those are the three conditions under which it exists.
right. So it's nothing like a Newtonian system.
If it's a
Basically.
point particle, how can it possibly be meaningful to exchange directional information at a particular angle? When two points intersect each other, it's only means anything for two.
I already gave this example, but if you were a school of tuna fish,
The tangent
let me answer your question. I already did in the video, but I'll do it again. If you were a school of tuna fish swirling around, a bunch of tuna fish swirling around inside of you in a school, and that's what you were, a school of tuna fish, and I took a school of sardines from the sky and I pushed them through you, and the sardines could do only one thing. They could just hit the tuna fish, okay, and move their direction in the direction the sardines would go, and then the sardines would go out the side. So a sardine would go in your head, it would come out your shoulder, or come out your ass, or come out at some other angle. It would lose angular direction, and it would impart its angular direction onto the tuna fish. So now more of your tuna fish would be going downward. Well, let me finish, fuckhead. I only got 20 seconds more to go.
Come on.
Now more of your tuna fish would be swimming in a downward direction.
hypocrite.
Exchange in directional information. More tuna fish are going down, more sardines are going sideways. That's the exchange, fuckhead.
But that's
Could you
nothing.
hold back the fuckheads? I don't care about you getting all heated, but just try to limit the fuckhead part, please.
No, not what arguments I've already made in videos.
We disagree with you, Gary. That's why you have to make these
Yeah, you're going
arguments.
to disagree with me
You're
by
not going to
making me
convince me.
repeat myself. Oh, I get that. That's a
Hey,
real
believe
waste
me,
of my
I don't need
time.
any more fish metaphors. They're not addressing my worries about your system.
Well, your worries about my system don't have a damn thing to do with a single fact. You haven't mentioned a single fact yet of why gravitons can't create fields if the fields are polarization.
And you haven't explained gravity.
Look, all right, I'll just leave, okay, because this is not going nowhere. My next video, I'm going to do some more on electricity and magnetism, okay, and it's obviously clear, okay, the field lines for electric fields are the same as the field lines for magnetic fields. It's the same perpendicular thing, which means there's all straight lines, okay, and it's an illusion that there's some sort of line. Those lines are an average, okay, of what the fucking gravitons are doing, but it's quite obviously that what a magnet is radiating is a stream of linear items that are coming off of the magnet, okay, and it's being represented based on fields that just representing the different angles that these straight line particulates are flying off at, and that's why it's always a perpendicular movement. It's the same truth for gravity. The two duplicate each other. All four of these things, gravity, well, at least all three, shadows, right? Shadows, gravity, magnetism, and electricity all obey, okay, the inverse square law, which can't be a coincidence. And that's my statement.
All right, okay. Well, you did definitely, I think I understand a little bit about where you're coming from more, what you hope to accomplish. And you're not as concerned with being Newtonian as I thought, but then that's also what I thought. But
well, the point is it's all kinetic at its core, okay? The rest of it's an illusion.
I don't even know what that means with point particles. I don't know what that's supposed to mean.
The only thing that's being exchanged...
Your particles are esoteric. Your particles are just as esoteric as anything else.
The universe has always had the same amount of energy in it. It's a closed system with the same amount of energy, and the only thing being exchanged is directional information.
The thing is, Gary, what about this? Would you admit, though, these quanta are as exotic of a particle as the photons, or when we're told that the electron is a wave? It's just as exotic. That doesn't mean it's wrong, obviously. I believe these can be true.
Go from point A to point B in a straight line at the speed of light is not exotic.
When you say kinetic energy,
in a straight line at the speed of light is not exotic.
Yeah, it is. Nothing does that. Everything slows down.
Oh, yeah, Feynman says that's what a photon does, so don't tell me nothing does that, because Feynman said it directly. That's what photons do.
As far as the inverse square law is concerned, it's just flat wrong as far as the orbit of Mercury is concerned, right? It doesn't account for the orbit of Mercury.
Oh, it does account for it. It just doesn't have the nuances of the special circumstance where Mercury happens to be extremely
If you just fucking like, I've got another 20 seconds to go, it's okay for you to interject, not for others. Secondly, if you're going to allow the electric and magnetic forces, what about the nuclear forces? They don't work on...
They don't work on forces are magnetic and electric. That's what I've just basically said. The nuclear forces are magnetic and electric. They're
no, but they're made up of your same phantasmagorical photons. Yeah? Everything's phantasmagorical point photons that sometimes decide to travel in pairs or quadruples,
sometimes
or whatever Gary feels like.
They're forced to do something.
Could we? I would like to hear Hythloday say what he's trying to say.
Anything worth listening to, I'm refused to be petty by this stupid, petty, retarded motherfucker. I'm going to show you up, and when I win my Nobel Prize, I'm going to send you.
Yay, inventor.
No, I kicked him. I'm not into the. I'm not into that.
Oh, he's just hijacking the whole thing. I mean, I was saying that. I mean, Newtonian inverse square law, basic looking at it, just didn't fit the data. Yeah, so Mercury didn't work.
Well, anyway, this bugs me because why can't we?
Because somebody came up with a theory of gravity similar to his, which accounts for an inverse square law, which Feynman said it accounts for an inverse square law. So he was like, yes, I'm okay, mathematically speaking. But the inverse square law wasn't enough. It didn't account for the orbit of Mercury. Then there's the second thing. He wants to say, well, mine accounts, but he builds from that. He says inverse square law for electric and magnetic fields, and yet doesn't want to admit the concept of nuclear fields.
But could we just stop right now? Inverse square law.
Yeah.
The magic of that is like one of the most intuitively obvious why that is, right? That's something everybody knows. You gotta. It's not because things go in a straight line. That's the stupid. That wouldn't work. It's the fact that everything goes out in a bubble. That photons look to go out in the bubble. It's that bubble, because then it's intuitive, because it's the squared is that it's a squared to the distance. So as you know, okay, that's why I asked ahead of time. But so acting like, well, that should mean something. Yeah, it means we really are in a three-dimensional space. That's the best evidence we have that calling the space 10-dimensional is just shorthand for we've got other variables besides space, and that space really is three-dimensional. Otherwise, you'd see a different thing. If the bubble going off was five-dimensional, then you'd have an R quad. You know, you'd have an R to the 4 law.
From Mendel's point of view, he would say that this inverse square law, how in high school you can see how it works with light propagation, follows, I recently bought a light meter, an inverse square law, and I wanted to do an experiment to show my little nephew Imagine going out in a black field, you know, and
Yeah.
charting.
You see what I mean? Look, if we measured how light dimmed from a distance, and it dimmed as r cubed, that would actually imply that there were dimensions we didn't see, and the photons are basically slipping off in those directions that we can't see, and they'd be disappearing, and that would be great, because then it's like, oh, that's where the dark energy or matter is coming from. Okay, but it didn't work out like that, and so in a way, this is one of the things we preserved from classical physics that's a mathematical thing that's like, well, of course. Just like when we were talking about temperature, okay, not really a field, but I would say it is composed. It's a complex field. You know, it's made of fields, so I could still say kind of a high-level field. You know, you can do that with the inverse squared law. You know, if people are born in Jakarta and keep spreading out at a constant rate, you know, you'll have an R-squared type law, except for they'd have to do it in 3 dimensions. But you know,
but your line of argument with the inverse square law doesn't bear fruit, because the fact is, if we take Emendham and more promisingly, more credibly, Feynman says that with this sort of, I think, what is it, Lesage.
Right, yeah. I'll try to look that guy up.
It produces the same inverse square law. Now, maybe not intuitively like you can see it in yours, but Feynman would say when two systems come up with the same mathematics, without something that distinguishes them, you can't make a decision about the mechanism. So it's the best thing to do when confronted with an inverse square law argument is to say it just don't fit the data, not that, oh, it's such an intuitive answer, because he says, but it doesn't matter how intuitive it is. I'm saying that it's because the same inverse square law, but through a statistical collision.
Yeah. I mean, I think in this system there's a lot of emotional needs about it, because the whole claim that there is a purpose, like to overthrow this other spooky physics, I mean, it's no less spooky. He is recognizing that the Newtonian regular BBs and gears bumping into each other, some of them are just really tiny BBs, that isn't enough. So he has this light speed thing that has all kinds of weird behaviors about whether it's polarized, whether it takes up space or not, you know, and frankly, it's just kind of a callback to the physics that he learned as a kid, probably when he was, because when we were kids, you know, his and my age, you know, they were still telling us that these nucleus were like point-like particles and they might not really have space. Now they don't say that. Now they have regular geometry, and what's weird is that space gets weird and folded and stuff like that, but they have shapes. They measure them. They'll draw what the shape of the electron bubbles is. You know, they're over that. It reminds me of hearkening back to some of the intuitions, and so that felt intuitive, and now he's arguing for something that feels intuitive, but his place in history is in between these two regimes of the purely mechanistic levers and billiard balls, and this God only knows what it is kind of postmodern thing. And he's in the middle, heavily influenced by the idea that it's something weird. It's pear-like things streaming through space that are invisible. I mean, that's weird. By the old regime would consider that weird. So he's stuck on the weird side of scientific history in the modern world with us, and yet he wants to use rhetoric like he's hearkening back, and Feynman is Dr. Quantum, and it's like, well, that sort of kills the conversation about anything, but especially about speculative science fiction, because I've worked in, you know, science and at universities and stuff, and before the internet even, you know, they get it, people call them all kinds of names trying to keep them out because it's just a boys club, and why can't their theory win the day, and this crackpot science thing, and it's like, it's not necessarily, I always found him was interesting. I would stop and find little strains of truth, but why is it impossible then to discuss? Well, because I'm a dogmatist and I know nothing out, and you know, Gary I really want to believe he's joking, Gary, if you're watching, that you're joking about this Nobel Prize stuff, because you just don't understand what's going on. It has nothing to do with the good old boys club. People didn't, the scientists of the day when relativity came on board did not want to go with that. It's just that the most advanced unanswered questions all started getting answered, and so they had no choice. You know, they had a bunch of enigmas that everybody, it's like if somebody came up with a theory that started answering all kinds of enigmas, like an answer of what dark matter was, and then that also gave a bunch of, you know, like also what somnoluminescence was answered. All of these things that are known unknowns got answered by one idea. Physicists have no choice but to go along. And it's not like they went very willingly. You know, and there were plenty of old physicists, just like there are anti-Semites that were working against Einstein. So it's like, yeah, there's sociological pressure, but if anything, the historical pressure is that they were kicking and dragging from a world where they thought, I'm a physicist, I could tell you the future with enough information, to, I don't know what the hell's going on, and 98% of the universe is made out of shit we can't see and don't know what it is. They did not do that willingly. You know, Gary is a latecomer trying to kick and scream when that argument's 100 years over. You know.
Well, he has to be dealt with on the merits of what he puts forward, and I find that when he's pressed, it's equally phantasmagorical as the quantum physics sounds. I mean, there's a strange irony in the fierceness of his rejection of quantum mechanics, which to a degree I empathise with, is that you know, they say if you're not thoroughly shocked by the implications of it, then you haven't understood it. So in one sense, the irony is that he really does understand it, because he's saying, fuck that shit, that's not for real, I'll come up with something better. And you know, I have issues with it, with probability waves and with all the stuff that we could have talked about, but well, I think it's generally serious.
I succeeded as keeping my thing out of it. I mean, my current thing is that it's information transactional, and it's sort of this ultimate equivalency thing. And what it means is that the whole idea about quantum mechanics, like if it's observed, it's not observed by a human being. It's observed where observed means interacted with some material and had this Hilbert space quantum, you know, collapse that they know the math about. Basically, the two quantum systems interact, then they have an interaction which sort of commits information. So the information really is out there. It's an old philosophical question. Are we just gathering information about things? Because we know our information is about things. It's the photon that came here. It's not the actual surface over there. It's about, is there really information over there? Yes, there is. And I think we're finding out that it's entropic. The information that's still out there is part of the entropy, right? And the loss of information is literally physically related to, you know, the loss of temperature in a conduit, and all the thermodynamic versions, they map exactly. Yeah.
Have you any opinions as to how, though, it's stored or physically represented, this information? You know, like I was saying to Gary about, you know, about that, if you just start off considering billiard ball interactions.
Well, I imagine something like this. How's it stored, I think, is arbitrary. I guess I'm starting to, when you say there's an informational universe, you concede to some of the red light rocket, you know, that thou art that kind of thing of, well, you know, how's it stored? Things become somewhat arbitrary, and we get into this idea of, like, when we're graphing data, we can make, if we have 5 degrees of freedom, we can make any 2 of those the spatial dimensions. The other dimensions could be the brightness of the dot, or, you know, there's other ways. But spatially, you can map information into dimensions where you define dimensions more or less arbitrarily, like you do mathematically. Yeah. Something like that seems to have to be going on, and that would, and if it was really that arbitrary, this mapping, not random, but kind of arbitrary, that would explain how things that seem spatially distant in some other mapping are actually still next to each other and get to interact because of that.
But I would say that that's for us in mathematical modeling terms, that sometimes things can look arbitrary. You know, you can represent it one way, represent it another way. But in terms of how reality actually updates the configuration that we are from one moment to the next, it has to pick. Yeah, it doesn't
Well,
get.
okay, but no, but in the quantum
I'm going to update Pyro. You know, grey is her tomorrow or something.
But that's by force-carrying particles. The idea is that each of these particles, of which there's, you know, a little spectrum of them, maybe unifiable, maybe not, but a small spectrum of these particles, that they are information. The information is exchanged when that particle strikes the other particle and actually interacts. You know, bounces off, deflected, anything.
Yeah,
but it can also zip tunnel right by, and then there's no interaction.
As far as I'm concerned, I mean.
And so the spatial distance is thus a kind of interaction, because it allows non-locality. Like without space, everything's local. So it creates this phenomena of locality. And I'm fine with some unknown, but along the lines turning out like, okay, the Higgs boson, energy into this particle, you know, that's the little thing that becomes the little cells that spreads everything out. It's the guy that's running the little algorithm that maps everything into three-dimensional space. Just like if I wrote a program, something else would, you know, maybe there's another way to map it out, but this Higgs boson, because of the way it interacts with everything, is able to be a graph paper for other particles. And it actually still is a particle, and it's always particles, you know, that are informational neighbors. And that's what I don't know what that would exactly mean. What does it mean for two bits of information to be neighbors and have locality, right? Shouldn't we still want to have an actual bottom storage mechanism that is the real way that data is stored, and we don't get that yet out of this system. We get something weirder that, like, well, you know, somehow it's all stored in one place and you can pretend they're different locations, or, you know, I don't know where that goes. But I think a solution like that, you know, if you could do the math and find out enough about the Higgs boson, and they would come up with a way that energy could come in to provide this illusion of non-locality, this illusion of separation, then you get two things. One, you could have the math of how stuff is the laser that sprays things onto the television screen we're in, but also it becomes not an illusion, because you really have created the ability for something to happen here that's different from over here, so that's not illusion, that's just how space got made.
Well, I think the idea of extra-dimensional connections are a ready way of resolving the apparent paradox of entanglement and what's the word, correlation at distances. Yeah. So granted.
Yeah. Well, this folding of space idea that you have from topology, something along that lines is happening, because, you know, right? You can't have non-locality, really.
Put a picture on it. I understand the math. I just hate to commit to the picture. Well,
I have a feeling that, okay, sometimes I will say we already know that locality is violated, right, because there's this term in physics, but in a way, no, philosophically, you can't violate locality. So if physics, things happen at a distance, if there's any violation of what we'd call locality, it requires this other concept of space is somehow folded. In other words, if two things interact, that's what we really want to have defined space. So if it looks like they're far apart, we have to go, well, there's some spatial relationship in which they're right next to each other. And in other words, because at that level, it's about, I'm just saying, informationally, locality is about information that interacts. Can I make one argument about these three things? Yeah, if all the ideas are right here together, I can put them into one argument. And so in a sense, locality is like almost like you know, in a logical reasoning, whatever relates one step to the next, that's our psychological basis for locality. That things, you know, so it's almost like locality almost is more about time. That there's a sequence through time, you know, that we can have a path. And I think you could have that be somewhat of an illusion, because imagine if it's a computer memory. Yeah, you could step through that computer memory and get a path, and still on some other level, no, the whole memory was there the whole time. There was no path. That's just your experience over time, because you use time. If you looked at it timelessly, it's all there.
Let me ask you a question about locality and non-locality. Philosophically, are you prepared to have it on the table, the idea of non-locality? I mean, true non-locality, not dimensionally connected, no informational schema that allows for it. That's, you know, like this happens over here.
No, because I think it's a rhetorical thing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. Right, I'm saying rhetorically, it's just we have to change our idea of because I would call that non-locality on some level, but what I'm saying is no, I would also bend over backwards and say if two things can interact, they're local in some space.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just by definition, right? Just by definition.
I think I'd agree with you that true non-locality is philosophically off the table. If anybody wants to bring it, they're suggesting magic, right? Yeah. They're saying if these are correlated up, down, opposite, always, but there's no connection between them, and yet the reality of its position is only true when we measure it, and then the other will suddenly point down, then I say you're saying magic. Yeah. I'm saying the only way I'll accept that at the table is that there is a mechanism, we just don't know, and a feasible definition is extra dimensional.
Right. Well, the probability wave allows a mechanism, but yeah. Because that's the funny thing, that spooky action at a distance can't transmit information faster than the speed of light or otherwise violate relativity. It doesn't hint that it might. So there's sort of weird little tricks about how we might be. In other words, it doesn't switch to up or down. It's just that we've committed to the universe where it must be up. In other words, informationally, this information means that information. Nothing has to travel between the two in order for them to be correlated. And the fact that they could be correlated either way probabilistically, you know, doesn't have to be a big deal, right? Because what you're saying is, like if you have the multiverse version, basically you're saying, when I looked at that, I took a slice of all the multiverse where the polarization was north-south. And so I know that the polarization of its pair in my universe is going to be the opposite of that. If somebody's over there in my universe, they're going to see the opposite.
Does what you're saying not probe at the concept? I mean, I don't believe in free will anyway, but from a point of view, if that what you were suggesting, your interpretation is very much an underminer of the idea of free will, you know.
It could be. Hey, we should talk about free will next time. I don't know if you want to come regularly, but I kind of am ready to commit to being able to do a show every week.
We'll commit to trying.
Yeah, I'm going to try, and I'm going to try to do
obligation.
Yeah. I like the once a month, but I don't think people will. So I'm going to try to commit to an hour or two, and I think Sundays is good.
I can't always promise I'll be here. I don't know that, you know, but if it's up and doing it, I'm usually not doing anything.
Well, I'll notify you. And
I would be into doing it.
Cool. Okay. Well, I think I'm going to try to do it again.
What would be helpful is if, like, a day or two before there was a video or a posting somewhere saying topics that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
So
okay, I'll do that. During the week, I'll post some ideas for topics, and we'll make an agenda. I think that's a good idea.
Cool.
Listen, for my part, I hope it doesn't come across as I'm shouting. You sometimes feel like you're having to speak loud or something into the mic. I don't know if that's the case with Gary, but I really don't like the. I'm fine if you're outraged. There's no need to impart it. You could come in and say, listen, and take me to task about anything, but I really not one for being shouted at, you know.
Yeah, me neither, except for I'm willing to put up with the shouting to a certain degree if somebody can have the presence of mind to not get too coarse. I think it's like, okay, well, they're obviously keeping together a little bit. If it's just going to all go loose, that's not the kind of room I want. I don't really care how many people come if that is what was popular, for example. So I'd rather nurture a decent discussion. And Gary's welcome to come because I think he does know how to add to those, and especially on some other topics. I would wish he would get back to some of these political topics. So, okay, so let's go. But does anybody have an idea of maybe what a good agenda item is? I do think it would be fun to run over some of our classics that we go over the years, and maybe freedom of will is an interesting one. I could talk about natalism more. I do think there's an interesting subject matter there still to go.
I was the first time I went to one of Gary's back in the day. What was it called? The tiny chats.
Yeah. No, stick 'em in the old day.
I went to the business. I mean, it's nice when you don't have to do it with a few members and work informally. But I don't like the idea of Emendum, you know, I can't interrupt him, you know, working interjectally, and but he wants to shout over everybody else, and I'd like to have it implement, you know, the whole. If it gets too much, let's calm it down and go.
I would like. Yeah, I think that just naturally, if I host this, there's plenty of chance for me to say, oh, I think the universe is informational, and so basically, I would like to. Like when I was podcasting, I did only interviews. I would like to train myself. It's harder with you guys because we've argued so much, but I would like to do this thing where I try to focus on, you know, like making sure people don't interrupt each other, which means I don't interrupt people, right? Because it's even so. And then I would have a better position to kind of like, because the first time you guys were both going at the same time, I was able to mute for a moment, and it, you know, and so hopefully that kind of solution will work. And I would like to focus on doing that and getting other people to say, you know, to debate each other and to clarify their views. So we'll see. I mean, that's kind of the tack I'm going to take. I'm sure I'll end up arguing anyway, but I would really like to get everybody's ideas out there. I mean, my main goal with most of this, for as far as everybody else is, you know, it'd be cool if we really knew all the colors and the spectrums of everybody's different opinions and people that think they agree in one big subject and how they actually disagree. I mean, so if we could chart that out, you know, and if I ever create the tools that I want to create, we'll actually get graphs and stuff of that. You know, wouldn't it be neat if our conversations generated mind maps, you know, and we could look at what the computer thought we talked about? I mean, these things, I really would like to get there, but we could just start with the regular conversation, sort of focused.
Topic. AI, just to write down, maybe we'll discuss AI. Have you watched Lucy?
I'll write that down.
Transcendent.
Yeah, I just
films. And it brings up those questions of, you know, whether a computer, you know, like you're just saying about whether it could just automatically generate a mind map, and one imagines an intelligence one day just be able to assimilate the entire content of the web and just say, you know, I know it all. Ask me anything, I'll give you a definitive answer if there is one, and a probabilistic answer based on opinions. You know, it would be quite a thing.
Well, I'm into that topic. I've thought a lot about it. So, all right. Well, you guys, enjoy the American World Cup. Is today American World Cup final?
I forgot about that.
15 minutes.
Yeah, Gary, Emendum, you know, we've got to watch the Super Bowl, so...
The American World Cup, as I call it. Okay, talk to you guys later.
See you later, bye.